Welcome to the Data Strategy Show. My name's Samir Sharma and I'll be your host for the next 60 minutes. My guests today are Jit Roy and Pritam Paul. Jit leads Bridge I2I with a special focus on driving growth by delivering customer value for clients in their digital transformation journey. He co-founded Bridge I2I in 2011 and is committed to building the next generation of technology solutions to make AI real for enterprises. He's got 21 years of analytics experience, and before founding Bridge I2I was involved in setting up and scaling the Analytics Center for Hewlett-Packard, and in an earlier leadership role, he was involved in building GE's Analytics Center of Excellence in India. Pritam leads innovation and technology at Bridge I2I and provides strategic leadership for its business efforts within the consumer industries. He brings over 2 decades of rich experience in analytical transformation involving technology and data science across various industries and functional domains. Pritam has worked with several Fortune 500 firms in customer intelligence, commercial spend optimization, operational effectiveness, sales transformation, and intelligent automation. Please do like, share, and comment on today's podcast, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you. Welcome, Pritam and Jit from Bridge I2I onto the Data Strategy Show today. Thank you so much for coming on, guys. It's a real pleasure to have you today. Listen, as we start off, would you be able to just give me a little bit about your backgrounds, who you are, where you've come from, and not how old, not from when you were 3 years old, but just give me a really good high-level summary.
Sure. Thanks, Samir, and pleasure to be here. Nice to be on the show. Thanks for having us. So this is Jit. My full name is Jit Roy, but you can call me Jit. It's probably easier that way. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Bridge I2I. Have been in the analytics and AI space for the last 22 years or so. I graduated out of Indian Statistical Institute with MS in Quantitative Economics. Have worked for a while when GE was starting to set up analytics practice for the consumer finance business in India. And they were looking at people who have a background to work on modeling. And honestly, I also didn't know the meaning of modeling at that point of time, but luckily into it. So I took up that role, and it was very interesting. It was almost the start of the analytics industry, especially in India. So got an opportunity to almost see it from the scratch and almost see the industry build up. So played quite a few roles with the consumer finance business, set up the insurance analytics practice for GE, now Genworth. And then as GE was hiving off the services business as Genpact, was responsible for commercialization of analytics for non-GE clients. So I had done that for 6 years or so. Then moved to HP, Hewlett Packard, and was responsible in setting up the analytics practice for HP globally. Build that up and supporting all the business functions and regions globally. And then seeing the business models of GE and HP, honestly, they're very diversified. And a few of us who had worked together always thought, that's the next big thing. If so many business models in GE and HP can do so many things with data, and the way data is exponentially growing, maybe we should step out and create an enterprise which is a combination of analytics and technology. And that's really how we thought about Bridge I2I. So 2011, that's where a few of us got together, Pritam and I and the third co-founder, Ashish, and started Bridge I2I. And today we work with a lot of companies globally in trying to drive AI-driven digital transformation. So that's a little bit about me.
Great. Thank you very much, Jit. Pritam.
I think it's wonderful being here, Samir. I think Jit gave a fairly good view about what he has done, and very interestingly, I had been knowing him from my college days.
Yeah,
he was my senior.
Amazing.
And then we have worked together. So I think he has covered more or less both of our career graph. He had been part of G as well as HP.
And amazing that you've both been part of the same sort of cohort of people and companies, and suddenly here you are. But carry on. Sorry, Pritam. I think that's wonderful.
No, yeah, no, absolutely. I think, yeah, I mean, similar experience, similar background, but I think both of us have very different, strengths that we kind of both come with.
Mm-hmm.
And large part of my experience in both G and HP had been really about bringing data and algorithms together, and that's what I do even for Vijay to I in driving innovation, driving technology. But looking forward to the discussion.
Perfect. And that's fantastic. Look, thank you so much for that. One of the things that I wanted to lead off with is lots of organizations are coming out of this pandemic. They've possibly looking at restructuring their businesses and understanding what new business models might be useful for them for the future. So, what I really was looking at with digital transformation, it's quite a wide label. What do you think the opportunities are for a lot of companies coming out of COVID and facing the situation of where they are in this new landscape?
Yeah, I can give a shot maybe, and Pritam, feel free to add on. I agree with you. I think digital transformation is two loaded words again, but in certain form is also reality pre-COVID and also post-COVID. I think a lot of businesses are trying to go more digital, and just to paint a little bit of picture, the way we look at it. See, we as consumers are used to a few business models. Like,
Sure.
we like what we get from Amazon. We like what you get from Google. And that's, as consumers, we now expect every business to be so digital. And that pressure sits with almost every enterprise today to give us those experiences. And that's really fundamentally what I would call as the purpose of digital transformation. While businesses now also have means to do it, honestly, means the ability to sell online, using RPA tools, using again IoT devices. A lot of those are what businesses are using to change the way they run their operations, as well as the way they interact with customers. So, and that's probably digital transformation the way we see it. And again, digital transformation again. It is digitalization, but it's not just building an app. It's not just that. I think any of these digital models, interestingly, actually generate a humongous amount of data, whether you sell online or you drive IoT devices or others. So that essentially gives these models an ability to use that data, learn from it, and give experiences which are more contextual, more valuable. And that's where we see things are moving, because everyone can build an app. But digital transformation and a lot of the work which from learning from data and making a machine kind of drive actions which we label as AI or artificial intelligence go hand in hand. And today, I think post-COVID, I think it's even more relevant. Is your supply chain, the way you sell, means there is a physical and digital, and whoever has an option to go digital, some industries probably will not be able to do it, but more and more industries are trying to go digital. So there, both digital transformation and even I would say the role of AI and analytics plays a huge part in today's world. And we also see it again. This space is for a little bit. Programs were suspended, but I see the last 6 months, businesses are back in action. They're really trying in a big way, trying to kind of adopt digital transformation, and they know there's no way out of it. And a lot of technology spend is getting in that area.
I think another interesting thing that what we have also observed is that digital transformation was being talked about for some time, and as Jit was talking about, that there is a significant amount of push from probably senior leadership and CXOs now. I think that it's happening in two different levels. One is about look at every function and say how the function can get better, how they can provide better experience, how they can be more automated, as a process. But more of what we are also seeing in the last 6 to 8 months is the cross-functional transformation, which actually cuts across various functions to come together and drive. And that means, new reimagining the process itself, which will be cutting across how individuals will be interacting with the product. And that might mean a lot of things from the data standpoint also, right? Data which was previously seemed to be islandish for each of the functions, now actually need to, in some sense, come together to be able to drive such kind of transformation. So
Sure.
all of those are what we are really observing during the last 5-6 months.
And I like both of those responses. One, because you're right, Jit, in the sense that, it's not about building an app. It really is about shaking the trees, really understanding what's going on within the processes, to your point, Pritam, and reimagining that, which is a fantastic way to look at it. But the humongous amount of data that comes with that, as you said, Jit, and the idea about purpose, this is all very conceptual. We can talk about it in such a way that's, we are practitioners, we understand how it's done, we know what we need to look at. But what are some of the challenges that organizations are currently feeling, having, trying to adapt to these new ways of business or new ways of working and digitalization? What do you see fundamentally are those hurdles that they need to get over in order to absolutely succeed, both in digital, data, cloud?
Yeah. So just I'll talk to one or two points, and Pritam can add to it. Uh, Fundamentally, I think digital transformation and AI, the way we are seeing, it's being talked by everyone. Every boardroom, I think, is today discussing how to drive it. But if you now go back to reality and practically, you would see one parameter would be how many business functions in most enterprises are using AI or digital transformation. You would probably see mostly will stop at marketing and then
Correct.
not thinking beyond that.
Yeah.
So that's one data point. The other data point would be I heard someone in a conference recently saying, we have more pilots than Lufthansa. Again, I think it's the reality of today's world where there are lots of AI pilots going on, but people are still not seeing things in production. And my humble opinion on it, in some form, business are talking AI, but still there's a lot of education process in terms of how to look at it, and because it's not so easy to just pull it back and say, let's just do AI and let's just do digital transformation. There are elements of data, and data and infrastructure sit hand in hand, but just the thinking means the concept of data has big time changed, and what can be leveraged, like a lot of unstructured data. How do you pipe them in, or how do you bring in, say, IoT devices and data in a fast-moving data? So a lot of those are one challenge. I think a lot of businesses still struggling to think about data, how clean is data. But tied to that is also, I think, skills and capabilities to drive it. I think a lot of people will be called data scientists, but it's not just a data science thing. It's about plugging them together to a business thinking, and it's a little bit of engineering plus data science plus design. A lot of those has to come together. So that's again the second thing. Businesses are not necessarily, they're hiring data scientists, but it's not solving the issues. And third, I think, is the whole process integration and scaling up, which I think is not easy, where the pilot concept comes up, because you're not keeping users in mind, in terms of, because at the end of the day, not all AI or digital transformation is human replacement. A lot of it is human enablement, we're not necessarily thinking how will humans use it, and hence the ability to scale that up with and drive adoption is still a challenge. So those are few challenges we are seeing quite a bit in terms of business. I'm sure it's a matter of time, but those are probably some of the things coming in the way to drive adoption.
Sure. And fantastic points, certainly around organizations struggling to see the value of the data, particularly from unstructured. But I think there's one thing that you picked on, which is the second point around skills, and it's just not about hiring data scientists, but it's actually about business thinking. From your perspective, Pritam, how do you start to bring those two together from a business thinking perspective, from the data and analytical perspective? What sort of methods or frameworks or approaches do you use in order to have better conversations and to Jit's point, to help that value come out within that landscape, within that organization?
Well, that's very interesting question and perspective, Samir. I think what we have seen is enterprises had been trying and doing it in different parts of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
Functional people thinking that this is what I need, and maybe a technology team is actually trying to drive their transformation of data in a very different way. And when these two are done very differently, the meeting point becomes very difficult, because you have probably not designed for the right technology. Somebody who is actually going after a real-time personalization solution need to actually start think from that standpoint and go back and see what data is relevant,
Mm-hmm.
and in what level of speed of data that you need to actually design for, right? So I think what we have seen is that the ability to actually conceptualize the design
Mm-hmm.
from a functional standpoint probably becomes key before you actually drive the more downstream transformation. Because we typically look at the other way. Let's put all the data in a lake, and then we'll
Yes.
figure out a way. And then you realize
Yeah.
that you have architected something that really cannot do the type of
Correct.
problem you are
Yeah.
solving. Now, from that standpoint, Samir, I think what we or thought processes were is that it's very important to actually lead by design.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you have to we have to start thinking about that. How do you think about this reimagining the new process? How do you understand? Because the business users will always articulate what they need, but
Correct.
what does that
Yeah.
mean from a
Yes.
data standpoint? What does
Yes.
that mean from an application standpoint? End of the day, you are building a product,
Mm-hmm.
right? A product for that situation, for that particular company, not a
Mm-hmm.
product that probably will go to multiple places.
Mm-hmm.
But being able to design that fast and then going back and saying, this is how all the other things comes together, probably is a little different skill. And that's where I think your first question and the previous questions, I mean, on where companies are also struggling.
Sure.
I think that
Sure.
skill of driving such things
Mm-hmm.
is
Mm-hmm.
also new, right?
Yes.
Somebody who is driving an IT transformation had been driving for a long period of time. Somebody who is driving a pure functional transformation, there are multiple people who have driven that.
Mm-hmm.
But somebody who is actually holistically thinking about this transformation in a enterprise, it's not too many. And
Correct.
that ability to drive that project and ability to design that project together is something that certainly is a area of discomfort for most of the companies.
So it's an interesting point you bring up, Pritham, because what you've just outlined is that there are very few people in organizations who can look holistically. So who is it that is best placed to absolutely drive that? Let's call it business transformation, because we can call it digital, we can call it data, and I think they all fit within the model of business transformation. So who do you think is best placed to absolutely drive that transformation from a holistic point of view?
I think it's going to be probably a combination of multiple things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, in some sense, within every enterprise themselves, every potential partners, be it an IT partner, be it a consulting partner, be it a pure play analytics or AI partner, each one of them are thinking from their own strength of positioning and trying to fill up the rest of it. But
Mm-hmm.
in my mind, it is probably everybody is lacking somewhere, one part of of the puzzle, and
Mm-hmm.
they're obviously kind of building up that part of strength. But I feel it is also not something that is really only a partner game. It's going to be something that you work alongside with the people who are really driving that business day in day out, and the ability to create like a SWAT team that can
Mm-hmm.
come together,
Mm-hmm.
bringing skills that you have never thought that are important for actually driving business, like design skills, like I
Yeah.
see nowadays design skills becoming so critical for for it. So always our design skills were about UI design, but
Mm-hmm.
that's a very small part of design. I
Yes.
think there's
Yes.
acknowledging that there is an aspect of design that needs to come together
Yeah.
along with functional as well as technical knowledge is probably critical for doing the design. I think it's very difficult to find out one person who knows all things.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think there's got to be a blend of all of those. But I do feel that for many, many years we've missed that opportunity, the redesigning, the reimagining. But from a design thinking perspective, I think we've completely missed that. So, I came upon that maybe in 2014. I came to that realization, like, whoa, we're actually leading with different. We're leading with technology, or we're leading with data, which is the wrong conversation. So to bring it back into the design view is very, very few people actually think that. So that's a really, really valid point. What I wanted to get back to, Jit, is one of the things that you picked up on earlier is you talked about AI and you talked about human enablement. How do you start to bring teams along that AI journey? I mean, I know that AI is very much this concept at
Yep.
the moment, and we're not in real AI. We are very much in the machine learning aspect. Lots of companies are still probably very immature at what they're doing with, and that there isn't the idea of being at the true AI perspective, or at the end of that road. We're just at the beginning. How do you help those people to understand how machine learning, AI, these types of tools and techniques are going to be able to help them with their ways of working, with their process efficiencies, with building new models? How do you absolutely infuse that into an organization?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think as consumers, I think we are seeing AI, and I think there probably means a lot of things, be it Alexa, be it means Google or others.
Mm-hmm.
There's some element of exposure to AI, and I think we are adopting to it and accepting it, and we're liking it. But I think the moment it goes to enterprises, and
Yes.
when I'm converting myself to a worker,
Mm-hmm.
I think still there's a little bit of fear factor which sits, and it's natural, it's not unnatural in any form. Is this machine coming to replace me? Kind of a thing. And I think, yes, a very repeatable job gets
Mm.
replaced, but more often it is about enabling you to
Mm-hmm.
do something better. You are a
Yes.
doctor. Obviously, you are certified to be a doctor. You would still be needed to do, but can your decision be supported by an AI engine? It's an assistant, or to help you through the thing, is probably how businesses have to think about it. And we can
Yes.
change the story to say a salesperson. Obviously, you can't replace a salesperson. That's we are far away from it. But can we make the salesperson more effective at the point
Sure.
of sell?
Yeah.
And can again I drive something like a guided selling to where
Mm-hmm.
the machine actually guides. So I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of exposure has to be probably given. I think in terms of workers to start thinking about this new process, and how in a smaller doses you are actually kind of let people accept it, and again, and the threat factor is removed, and the value factor is thought through. And partly, I think, even to your earlier question, I think in an enterprise, this has to be top down. It going bottom up is a very longer term
Mm-hmm.
thing. If you expect sales guys will come and tell me, give me AI, that's still going to take time. So a CEO, probably, or even a board and others have to push it. I think wherever we are seeing
Yeah.
adoption, we are seeing because a board is pushing, or a CEO is pushing, or an operations head is thinking, I need to rethink how our operation runs. So
Mm-hmm.
this still will come because of a top-down mandate, because of thinking, how do I compete better
Mm-hmm.
in today's world? Because in some cases, you will be threatened of a non-existence if you don't cope up, because everyone is adopting it. So it's the leadership push which will be a big part, and then a certain level of thinking through how users use, say, gamification as a concept for a moment. Say sales works in a specific way. Can I create a gamified way with a certain set of design thought process and further adjust? A lot of those will come into play. So one is remove the threat factor slowly. Use more and more design principles. Then our top-down mandate. Some of the things we have seen are very useful in terms of more adoption, and people looking at this, it's going to enable me. It is enabling me as a sales guy. It is enabling me as a HR guy. So all of those will happen as these 2-3 things can be pushed probably.
I'll really add a couple of technical
Sure.
perspective maybe
Yeah, absolutely.
on
Absolutely.
that, Samir.
Yes.
So one thing that actually comes is like, when I probably interact with, let's say, experts who are pricing products, experts who are, managing risk, or kind of driving sales, that whole concept of, I don't know what this box is doing, and I will not be able to catch when it goes wrong, right? That whole aspect of that it's kind of going out of my control, and I don't know when I'll be doing mistake, is really something that many a times actually create a lot of questions and doubts about it. So,
Sure.
a lot of work around probably, explainable AI,
Yes.
on finding out that, what is driving, and, how to catch something which might be going wrong, I think is critical. The success on that part is critical to make some of these experts feel that, I am in control of
Of
the
course.
solution that is
Yeah.
actually supporting me.
Yeah.
The second important part that I see is that, any of AI solution will only be effective over time, right? With more data, with more feedback. What I've seen with many of my, people I work with, is that there is so much of so-called glamour around that, that AI will tomorrow solve my problem and
Yeah.
suddenly solve my problem.
Yeah.
That there is a heightened expectation that as soon as your fast product is out, your life is completely sorted, right? So what happens is that heightened expectation do not give enough time for a solution to work, and that actually adds to neonatal
The
death.
skepticism.
Yeah, and a neonatal death for an amazing solution in the being, in the making. And that's why probably many of these, so-called, you have so many pilots, because you have not really given time for that
Yes.
pilot to really be successful. And we have seen that, people where there is a executive mandate, and they understand that, things will be right over time, and create that experimental setup, have actually seen over time things working. And these are obviously, I think as AI practitioners, we also need to be technically driving, both of these areas, to make it successful.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think one of the things around the glamour of AI is absolutely hampering. And there's lots of statistics out there by many organizations that are saying most of the initiatives that are either being driven out through POCs or, particular data programs, etc., are failing by about 85%. If you look at the Gartners and, and others, and one of the surveys that is highly referenced across the data industry, and is now probably out there within many organizations, and they're looking at, is the New Vantage Partners survey. And one of the elements that I've been seeing recently is the fact that while the failure rate is high, many CEOs are actually seeing that the failure rate is high, even higher at about 90%, but they're saying that it's attributed to culture. And so therefore we could have the best analytics, we could have the best AI model, we could have the best people, but we would have high resistance from the organization. Maybe it goes back to your point about skepticism. Maybe it goes back to a number of things. Where do you start to factor that into the projects and the ways of working within your world and within the, how you work with clients? How do you address that question at the beginning, or where do you start to have those conversations? Either one of you. Jit. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, so uh, I think to Pritam's point, a lot of it is also setting the right expectation. One of the
Mm-hmm.
things we try to do is not to put the expectations that, it means a project can get done in 3 months, but that doesn't mean you will see all the results in 3 months. It's
Yes.
going to be a journey. I means think about how Google search had been a decade back
Yeah.
versus what Google search with what they would even predict your question before you
Of
finish it
course.
now.
Yeah, as you're typing it. Yeah.
And lot of it has been learning and data,
Yeah.
and it has evolved. It couldn't do that 10 years back, and there was a
Mm-hmm.
lot more
Mm-hmm.
errors out there. So I think that's true about any application. The more data fits in, more learning comes, it becomes better. So looking at it not as a one time
Yeah.
change the game, but looking at it as a journey is one of the things we try to drive it.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing we realize is I think in general, we as data and data science practitioners are very complex people, and we love the complexity of algorithms and others, and we want to tell
You said
everyone
it, not
about.
me.
No, no, I agree. I am also the culprit, so I have to. We love to talk about techniques, random forests, and all
Oh
kind of
God,
things.
yes,
But
yes,
I think the reality is, the users are going to be people who have no clue about AI,
yeah.
and in most cases wearing that. And I think Pritam was talking about as design, and I think keeping usability, user experience, using how should that has to happen from very beginning.
Yes.
Process reimagination cannot happen just algorithmically or thinking data stitching.
Mm,
So
mm.
those are two aspects, in my view, which if it is done well, I think adoption will go up again.
Okay, fantastic. And I like that. I'm still trying to get out of the random forest right now. But Preetham, over to you. What do you think? Do you have any views on that as well?
No, I think Jit has probably covered that point.
Mm-hmm.
Culture certainly plays a lot of role. Maybe I'll give a example and scenario like
Sure.
companies who are probably trying to drive a significant transformation, but for just to kind of manage the situation within the organization, they end up taking so-called low-hanging fruits. Like those low-hanging fruits are about probably driving small automation in certain places. Now, what happens is that you might be happy that you might be driving 10 projects in the
Mm-hmm.
organization, but as an organization, you are not driving because you are not actually going after the harder ones that has actually much bigger impact, right?
Yes.
That I think comes from that whole concept of culture. That
Mm-hmm.
as a culture, you are feeling that you don't want to really shift, but if you have to make a bigger impact, there will be a change required because you are actually bringing in multiple things together. And there are also frankly there are also challenges which are around technology, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
can reimagine, but there is also your data might be in 5 different places. You might be actually every parts of the organization have kept data in three different something on premise, something in X provider, something with Y provider.
Mm-hmm.
Now
Mm-hmm.
even before you see a success, the amount of time and money that you will spend in kind of getting the data together, which
Yeah.
does not show a direct impact, right? The project is not really making movement, but something is happening under the carpet. That
Sure.
whole change many a times also is not seen in the right way, saying that
Mm-hmm.
are we really spending too much time and money? Maybe this is not really exciting enough. So I think these are probably symptoms of the possibility, but it probably comes down to the same backend saying that I don't want to change much.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take the so-called something which is very clear and very easy to do,
Yeah. Yeah.
and second is you know wherever it is about that black box, that I need to explain that. If I don't want to explain that, let's
Yeah.
not take it.
And I think that I know that explainable AI has progressed over the last couple of years. We've seen more and more organizations looking at that. And I think it's fundamental to what you said earlier. If you can sit down with your business partners, and if you can understand and draw up in a very simple way of structuring, say, a decision tree model, and saying, look, this is how the black box will work. If we put, these are the parameters, these are the variables, this is what we're doing in terms of getting to a decision point, and this is the next step that will happen. I think that's fundamental to the design thinking as well, because if we don't fundamentally do that, and they're confronted with a decision that's been taken, for example, if you look at the courts in America and how particular models have been used to commit convicts, to criminals, but actually they've been looking at it in a very skewed fashion because of bias, and so therefore it's not transparent. There's a level of we talk about conscious bias. It's not conscious bias, it's proper bias, which is, if you're an African American, you're 3 times more likely to go into, prison, and that's been programmed. So just being able to strip that out. How do you cater as a data scientist, Pritam? And I know you're both, model builders, but Pritam, how do you cater for that amount of level of bias in building models? What are the things that you do to trap that and ensure that you have that transparency?
Right. No, I think that's a very critical aspect, because many times we feel that if you have not planned for it, you cannot control for it, right? And see, I mean, end of the day, the models and structures are built in such way that it learns from patterns that is coming out from the data.
Yeah.
And if the data is biased because of the actions that you had, it will certainly create. And I think as AI practitioners, we use multiple different methods of generating experiments, give larger weightage towards those experiments, ignore and balance information so that you don't actually treat certain type of variables. See, I mean, some of these aspects are not very new. I mean, there are
Yes.
type of features as practitioners even 20 years back, we were told that these are the things that you don't use. But
Yes.
that's not the only one that creates bias. Because of that feature, something else is also correlated that also creates bias. Now, being able to really understand that and being able to create newer data that will take out the bias, obviously all of those needs to be done. But again, it will come back to the same concept of design. If you're not
Yes.
able to design and understand what bias you are actually solving for, you might not even know what bias you are actually adding to the system. So you need to actually list down saying, okay, these are the things which I am actually trying to keep things away. Then you will think about what needs to be done. Most of the cases, Samir, I feel that it's because you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
That has actually added the bias in the processes.
Yeah,
But,
it's sorry,
no, go ahead.
carry on, Pritam.
No, I'm saying that, see, I think the other challenge in that, probably a little aggression on that, other challenge of reimagination is also when you reimagine and show a process, there's also a challenge saying that, will this work? Right?
Yes.
You are certainly showing something very big. Now, would you take 6 months and experiment and show that, what is it, how to get a outcome out of that? I think that's where, being able to probably put it into modules, saying that, are there some meta layers at which your innovations can happen, right?
Yes.
Something actually you can then very quickly say, okay, I might not be able to show this whole solution in a prototype, but I might be able to do this part very fast, quickly. So I think about, from the standpoint of innovation, also, staying with all of these aspects, that, being able to innovate not at the end product level, but
Sure.
at a meta level,
Yes.
is also, then all of these things probably comes in together to be able to solve a,
I think
ethical problem.
I think Jit is dying to get in. Jit, no.
No, I agree with all of this. The only
Yeah.
point I would say is not to the point of that it's a journey, a lot of it is also about post implementation,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
seeing what's going on, and we call it more as a model governance and model
Yeah,
management. I think that's a very critical part. I think in AI, we typically try to solve it one time, put it back, and then we don't know what's happening after that. So the point, it has to get a closed looping. It means in some form, means
yeah,
techniques like anomaly detection and others play a big role to see, means you can make mistakes. But how do you very quickly correct that with the right parameters, with another aspect which has to be thought through in it, because you will make mistakes, bias will creep in. But what
sure.
is the impact of that? How do you really realize that very fast is also very important.
And I like that last point that you made around the fact that post implementation, we're always talking about getting the algorithm into production. And I think you mentioned it earlier, Jeet, that one of the challenges is that most people who are doing POCs never get that into production. So now we've got another problem of the model governance on the back end, which is highly critical to most organizations. Do organizations have that capacity and capability and skills to absolutely embed that kind of governance in place? And how do you do that with all the competing priorities? Even data teams nowadays are very siloed as well, from data governance to quality to data science to analysis. So how are you embedding that level or organizational structure into
Yeah.
into companies?
Yeah, it's a combination. Part of it is technology, part of it is people,
Hmm.
part of it also culture.
Yeah,
We have
yeah,
seen it is working where the regulators are pushing you to do it. So in a
yes.
financial services and other industries, you actually have to do it.
You have
So
to do it regardless. Yes.
you don't have a choice, so people
Yeah.
are doing it. I think other industries are picking up. I think there's a growing consciousness around it. Because it's also tied to ROI. At the
Yes.
end of am I getting return of investment on this whole thing? Because it has a risk. Means if you look back a decade back or 2 decade, actually a decade back, a lot of investment went into business intelligence, and companies did not get ROI from business intelligence because they just kept on generating reports and
Yes.
reports and reports. And AI also has the same risk if we don't.
Yes.
And that's where I think those who are cognizant of it would actually get to tracking. And tracking and governance will go hand in hand, which is
Mm,
a combination of right technology, right people, right culture to kind of bring the feedback in and
yeah.
see what else. But
Yeah.
again, to Pritam's point, I think the more black box models you put in, more issues are there. It's not so easy to do a traditional models is easier to govern as
Hmm.
compared to the newer models. So there's a lot more evolution will also happen in some time in
Sure.
terms of how to drive the governance thinking.
Yeah.
I think the whole guidelines are also significantly needs
Hmm.
to be updated, Samir, because I remember 10 years back, risk models, you build it, there'll be 3 months of scrutiny by multiple people. It's an equation, so it's much easier
Yes.
to check. Now you're talking about a model that gets updated with every new data. It
Oh,
gets updated
absolutely. Mm.
with feedbacks coming in, and some of those are happening in a completely automated way. Now you cannot have every time somebody coming and checking, right? So you have to bring in technology to be able to drive governance. And
Yes.
I think it is also, if you look at the regulated industries like insurance, financial services, they're also thinking about how to enable that, because this is not how the usual book
Sure.
of audit really ensured, right? So I think it's a combination of process, technology, and many things. More because of the way and the type of methods that's being used
Hmm.
in today's world
Hmm.
for modeling as well.
Fantastic. Um, I'm going to throw a last question out there. And it's been on my mind. Actually, Jeet, you just referenced it. You talked about, and Pritam, you also referenced the historical view as well of model building. Jeet, you talked about what BI tools were like. We've seen a consolidation of BI tools in the market recently, which is really interesting. And we're seeing the sort of almost the demise of BI in some way, which also is quite unbelievable. Where do you think, from both of your perspectives, you've been embedded in the analytics industry, your days before, at college, when you met, when you guys were statisticians, modeling through to GE, through to the different flavors that you've seen over time. Where is this analytics going? Where do you think we're going to be branching it into? I know that's quite a tough question, but as we've seen what's happened, what do you think lies ahead?
Pritam, you want to talk about it? Yeah, my take, I think, see, it's going to be a very embedded analytics, and I think that's happening. I think, again, even without the term AI, I used to think earlier also, analytics will get embedded.
Right.
It's not a separate thing. People will even forget the word analytics in very soon. I think people will not even know that they're doing something which underneath that there is AI.
Yes.
Because
yes.
it's a sales app.
Yes.
It's a consumer, you're getting a personalized thing. A doctor is just like getting an ad coming in. So I think the future of it is how fast and how quickly it sits in the DNA. Now,
Right.
question is, who does
Perfect.
it? Is it a central function who does it? Is it going to be like a finance function? Like every company, you can't operate without a finance function.
Of course.
Is that the future? I don't know. That's going to be interesting to see how the evolution happens. But I think it's going to be, it's like inside a laptop. People will see laptops of different kinds. They'll not think about the chip inside. But AI or analytics is going to be the chip inside in terms of how fast, what data it processes, and then give outcomes which impacts our life. It impacts businesses. So that's how I see the AI of future.
Fantastic, and I like that. I don't know, Pritham, what do you think?
No, I think Jit has probably put it
Yeah.
across the right way. There's probably one key point. And you talked about BI and how the BI and the insights world is also changing. Um, no company will run without knowing where they are, right?
Yes.
So it's a question of in what way they will actually get that information. Always that it's all about coming to a dashboard and seeing that number. Maybe we'll see that number in a very different way. Maybe we'll interact with the data. Maybe the core insights will be actually sent to me by some sort of system that identifies all of these anomalies and
Yes.
tells me where to look at.
Yes.
So I think it's a design of how I will be part of that overall environment, and I will interact with insights and data at any point of time. Like
Correct.
how we are as
Correct.
consumers.
Yes.
Probably how the world is going to be.
Fantastic. And I love both of your responses, because I think one of the things that I often see is organizations always thinking of that last mile. And this is the wrong way to think about it. And I think both of your responses actually are great, because what we need to be doing is looking at that entire value chain, and where along that value chain do we infuse, and it should be seamless. And I shouldn't be thinking about a particular bit of data that I need then. It might be a trigger, it might be an outcome, and it might be a handoff to another department. So I think these are the things that I absolutely agree with you. Fantastic points of view. And I really would like to thank you both for being on the show today. You've made it a real treat for me. So with that said, thank you very much, Pritham and Jit. And I don't know, any last words?
No, thank you. It was a great interaction. Loved the last 40 minutes. So look forward to more interactions in future.
Fantastic.
Same here.
Thank you
very
so
much.
much. Thank you very much.